Okay, got the recording going again. Don't know what that was about, but anyway, so I'm going to turn it over to Ricky. And I just want to again thank you, Ricky, for stepping up last minute. And every time I talk with you, you just blow me away about the kinds of things that you're doing. And if I can steal your thunder for just a second, that Ricky is very engaged, particularly with minority communities. And so I think he brings a very interesting perspective. So with that, Ricky, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. And I promise you, I will not eat up much of your agenda time this morning. Um, because I'm not in Arizona, and I know I've been on here several times as guest and spoken one time. I just wanted to take a moment to reintroduce myself. My name is Ricky White. I am technically an Alabama native who's had the great fortune of living in several states in the US before coming back home to take a break and retool. And in that retooling process, I feel like I've hit a whole nother wind of life. In that retooling and in all of the travels that I have to do, there was a constant need of advisory and consulting, and we tried to avoid it like crazy. And I stopped avoiding it right before COVID. And then during COVID, we had the great fortune of being a voice of reason for so many organizations, institutions, government agencies, and leaders alike who were struggling to deal with technology, fast pacing information, especially in the broadband and connectivity space. We advised those who were just dealing with just honestly modernization for their teams and their organization. With all of the information that we take in, we're able to be a little bit more effective to each person down the road. It's one of those life moments that you learn something every day and you go back and apply it. So Blythe and White Consultancy, our firm, is our biggest focus is going to be operation, technology, and strategy. We provide that strategy for states, governments, private companies, institution leaders, and higher serving education institutions as well, primarily working with minority serving institutions with the work that we previously did with PBI based groups. In the midst of all of our work, what we have learned is there is a centralized connection between workforce, digital literacy, education, and then community. And somewhere in the middle, there's a disconnect in that process. During COVID, what we really learned is that connectivity allowed us what we needed to do to be educated, to work, and then have a sense of virtual community. But so many Americans, as you know, and as you deal with, are faced with issues that don't allow them to be connected. Whether you're justice impacted, whether you're rural, whether you're tribal, or if you live in an urban dense community that has poor connectivity of service. So before I say anything further, let me also pause and say I do not work for any ISPs. We're not legally contracted by any ISPs. So my statements are from our experience of just taking in loads of information, dealing with different groups all over the US, and it's not directed towards any service provider or telecom group specifically. What we're talking about is the communities that are still at risk and those that may have been serviced. What we want to do is be able to look at Arizona and say, we understand you have a plan, you have a map, and you have a group of individuals that care about connectivity to their respective communities. However, within that respective community, what we're learning is a timeline of implementation. And like everyone, we want instant gratification or we want something done a little bit more. What we found is that digital equity, in this case, was overlooked in many minority or low income communities. Digital equity was also missing in communities that were not classified as minority or low income because you have family households that have means that may have been in a digital desert where connectivity may have been low or not optional. And not many families can have satellite service or other options at such a high rate. What we want is to bridge the connection between higher education and local communities. In order to bring the proper amount of equity, we need education and connectivity to reach workforce. I'm going to repeat that. We need education with connectivity to reach workforce. You can't upskill or train someone if they're not connected to be educated to go and have their job, get a better job, or even just simply be a part of the job process. If we look at the locations of minority serving institutions, Hispanic serving, Asian, and tribal in your state, what we have is pockets of information and pockets of communities that may have minimum access to connectivity. Yet communities where you may have more influence in policy or legislative pull may get connectivity first. If we start with working in hub spots of those campuses, you can use campuses in order to become the hub and spoke model for communities. What we've done in different states, especially here in Alabama, was convene all of the minority serving institutions together to work collectively to bridge the gap in workforce, telehealth, telemedicine, research, business development through connectivity. That allowed the schools themselves that may have had a little bit of fiber coming to their campus to be a hub and spoke model to bring connectivity to the community that it was connected within, but also to take advantage of federal dollars and federal funding to support those underserved communities. So many organizations do similar and overlapping services, but we believe that these place-based organizations have the ability to bridge that gap through equitable solutions that allow the education and access to be made through connectivity. As a parent of a 5-year-old and an 18-year-old who's in college, it is critical that access to internet. I'm not even going to go on the minimum speed. I'm going to talk about just sheer access to the internet. It's critical to the learning and development of that child and of that household because we know that without it, families can't do anything. So our goal is to bring simple resources and solutions to communities like yours. We have multinational relationships with NVIDIA, Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, and now Xerox that will allow us to bring resources to communities that are not necessarily looked at. And that conversation shifted when organizations and institutions stop asking the multinationals for money and we start pulling on their resources. So our goal is to take these resources and support you from a workforce standpoint, support you from an education standpoint through the means of connectivity. So as I told Steve the other day on the call, I'm available. Some of my teams are available and we have it. I love Arizona. It's always baking hot, but I still tell you, like I said before, you guys had the best guacamole that I've ever had in my life downtown in Phoenix. Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, questions, comments, thoughts? Okay. Well, Ricky, thank you so much for being here. Um, and hopefully one day, and Aaron, maybe you can take this back to the broadband office, that I think he brings a whole, there's a lot of stuff he didn't even cover today. Um, work he's doing with broadband offices and with NTIA and so forth. And so it would be really good to have more further conversation with him. Um, um, about how he can work with Arizona. I think he brings a very unique perspective.
Hi there. This is Dana Cardenas of Sarah Star. I do have a question for Ricky.
Sure,
Um,
go ahead.
in in the different areas that you're currently working, I heard you speak of working directly with justice involved individuals. Are you working with any county jails or any DOCs to provide that connectivity currently for education, workforce, reentry and reintegration programs?
So we wrote up an initial white paper and a strategy plan to reduce recidivism with broadband connectivity,
Yep.
tapping into the need that correctional facilities or jails also legally qualify for infrastructure to bring the service to them. What we've been trying to do in the past month and a half has been partnering with Department of Justice, and we're working with two states that I can't say their names right now with their DOCs to be able to bring that level of connectivity. We found two great partners that has the tablets and resources. We have also segued in four two-year institutions and three four-year institutions that will provide education support for them with Department of Justice and Department of Education. And then on top of that, we're working on a final way to do some micro-credentialing and certifications for individuals. So we can move faster outside of red tape. What we learn is that every state and every community has its own level of politics. So the minute we get past the politics of who gets the credit, we literally have 19 resources that can drop down and connect that location instantly. Even when it comes to installation where service may not be available, it's not respectfully, it's not hard to install access points into cinder block facilities. Most low-income houses and housing projects are cinder blocks, and most schools still have cinder blocks around them.
So
Um,
Ricky, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dana.
I just put my email in the chat. I'd like to talk to you offline about some alternative solutions, so that would be amazing.
Okay, no problem. I'm going to be in the chat replying to everyone as well. Thank you, Steve.
So Ricky, how do institutions deal with the fact of security? It's not just the security that we all talk about, but when you're in a penal institution, the issues are completely different. I shouldn't say completely different, but do require a lot of issues about who can have access to who and who they can communicate with and so forth. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, so one of the companies that we work with has over 600,000 tablets across, I believe, 48 different Department of Correction facilities throughout the United States. And their tablet has an ecosystem of learning, family-based communication, development, and education. But they have developed the cybersecurity needs behind it. So it's critical that even though you can bring connectivity to a justice impacted individual that may be behind bars, that you've got to have the cybersecurity and some of those firewalls set up. There are less than two or three companies in the US who has that infrastructure. And one of the things that we wanted to cut that barrier down was once you get service to the facility, you either have the certified device or you have the certified firewall that helps support individuals that can be behind that system in order to operate. From our side, what we did was bring partners into the ecosystem. So it's certified and vetted. Therefore, if you're within the ecosystem, you can provide what was one of the groups? It was it was health and wellness. So they were providing things about how to grow gardens and health and eating, and they came with a micro certification. So when you have that ecosystem, you can deploy a learning management system, an LMS, that individuals can use that can track their progress, and it helps them build almost a digital resume. And there's a micro credentialing company through EBSCO that we work with as well, who has a system. So there is an immediate way to do it. It's just you only have two or three people who have the proper clearance to get through those firewalls that meets DOJ and DOC protocols.
Okay. Other questions for Ricky? Well, Ricky, thank you again for stepping up last minute. It's amazing the kind of work that you're doing, and I think it would be great, Aaron, if we could figure out how to get Ricky engaged in Arizona. It brings a wealth of resources to the table. And with that, Ricky, thank you again. Really appreciate you being here this morning. And now let's go back to Aaron. Aaron, you want to kind of give us an update what's happening with the broadband office?
Sure thing. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Lorandos. I am the Digital Equity Program Manager at the Arizona Commerce Authority. For folks who may be unaware, the ACA is administering both the BEAD and Digital Equity Act funding here in Arizona. So we've got both sides of the coin, the infrastructure piece and also the digital equity piece. Most of the updates this week are on that infrastructure side. Folks probably saw an email earlier this week from us that the project area maps and for being open for market sounding will happen this coming Monday. If you didn't get that email, let me know and I can definitely forward it to you. All of that is going to happen through that Broadband Navigator site that we used for our challenge process. So if you're already registered in that, then you should be good to go. But if not, that is the next step that you'll need to take. And you can do that through our website. I just dropped a link to the main broadband site page from ACA in the chat. If you navigate down to the BEAD page and then under that drop down the challenge process, and then under that link, accessing the challenge portal, that'll get you to the right spot. Let me give you a direct link to that as soon as it loads. Here we go. This is the page that I'm leaving in the chat right now. That'll take you right to the challenge process portal. And that's where you'll need to register for an account to see the maps. The market sounding will be open for 45 days. That basically allows potential applicants in the BEAD program to see the project areas ahead of time and provide us any feedback that you might have. And then we are still on track to open the application process for the BEAD funding later this year. The exact date, I believe, is still a little bit open just based on the changes that might come from the market sounding, but it should be late November, early December. And also on the main broadband page, you can click in to see upcoming events and webinars. We do have plans for group-specific in-person forums, basically for ISPs, for local governments, and then for our tribal contacts, tribal governments and tribal ISPs. And that information will be shared there soon. Let's see, on the DE side, not a lot to update. We're still working through getting our allocation here in the state. And once we have that, we'll be able to share timelines for the digital equity subgrants and the work that will be coming from that. So happy to take any questions that folks might have. And if I don't know, I will play the librarian card and I will find out. And I'll give you all my contact information in the chat if you don't have that as well.
Aaron, I don't think Kelly Kersey is on the call today, is she?
No, she's in Portland. So yeah, she's with the rest of the team.
Okay. Any questions for Aaron? Okay. Well, if not, let's move on to Nicole.
I have a question, Steve.
Go ahead.
Aaron, does for this broadband navigator portal where the project areas are displayed, is it only available for ISPs and communities to look at or to register for, or can any individual look at these project areas?
You can take a look, but the information is going to be for potential applicants. So there, that will be part of that process. And it's not posted yet. I just want to make that clear. They will be there on Monday, on the 23rd.
But you have to register to look at the project areas. Is that what you're saying?
You need an account. Yeah, you need an account on that page to be able to access it fully.
So can any individual open an account, or does it have to be
you can be. It really is meant for people who are going to be applying, though. So if a random person off the street registers for an account and their information doesn't align with either a local government, an ISP, tribal government, etc., that's eligible, that's part of the process. You can register, but it's really not meant for people off the street, if you will.
I see. Okay.
But Erin, I understand that as the broadband office is working on their state broadband map, which is listing out assets and eligible BSLs, that once those project areas are finalized, they're actually going to be adding that as a layer on their public-facing broadband access map. This part of market sounding is the engagement with potential applicants and the feedback from all eligible entities. But if you read through Arizona's that they're actually doing like 3 different drafts of these project areas. The one that'll be released on September 23rd is draft 1. Here's where we think the 65-ish project areas are going to lay. And then after that 45 days of feedback, they may adjust those project areas, repost that to open round 1, which is then available for applicants to bid on those particular project areas. And if necessary, round 2 with revised project areas that would pick up any locations that may have been missed or need to go out to be rebid and renegotiated.
So Nicole, could you introduce yourself real quickly? And it's a good segue to you giving us any other updates that you might have.
Let's slide in. Yeah. I'm Nicole Umayam. I'm the Federal Program Officer for Arizona. I work for NTIA, and I get to work with the Broadband Office and as their grant administrator for the BEAD and digital equity funding. We do have quite a few updates. I'm paring down a little bit here, but one of the key things is the NTIA's competitive digital equity grant. Those applications are also due this Monday by 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. The NTIA has hosted a series of informational webinars about this grant and how to put together applications and types of projects that are eligible. That final one was held on the 10th, but we've got all of those recordings that are up online that you can go through as you may be preparing your applications. NTIA also released a fact sheet on the progress of all of our broadband and digital equity funding. So this includes the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program. You may remember the BIP program and middle mile actions, and just a kind of a status update for people in general about where we're at throughout the nation in different broadband deployment projects. And earlier this year, the GAO released a report of recommendations on addressing legislative barriers for broadband programs in particular, really looking at the NTIA's IJA broadband projects in particular. And NTIA recently released a report that includes some of those status updates, as well as lengthy descriptions of the things we're doing as a federal agency to address some of these barriers, coordinate amongst our federal partners, and follow the letter of the law of the NOFO to make sure that we are meeting the intent of Congress as we're building this out. There is a resource that we also recently released, which is really interesting for potential applicants or just people who are following along in this journey. And this is all on the BEAD obligations for subgrantees in deploying the networks. So these are the technology requirements, the cybersecurity requirements, the deployment requirements, and financial requirements. These are already listed in the NOFO, but this resource just goes into a little bit more detail as applicants are kind of getting prepared to submit things before we see that RFP process open with the state. So it gets you a little bit more time to prepare. And finally, so a different federal agency, but the FCC, by statute, they conduct an annual assessment on advanced telecommunications for all of America. And they have right now open a comment session for their 18th inquiry on the state of broadband in the US. And those comments are due October 7th. So it's a good place for you to engage and to go on the record with the status of what that build out looks like or issues here in Arizona. Got a lot of links for all of these I'm going to drop in, but if there's there's other questions, we can take them. I know the BEAD process can seem unwieldy. Maybe you tuned in for last week for the congressional hearing about the status and the rollout of the BEAD process. That was kind of an interesting one. There's some write-ups that I saw last week coming out. I'm not sure if anyone was able to catch those.
Thank you for mentioning that, the congressional hearings. Do we have any sense of where that's going and what they're trying to get to, and how much of that is posturing for the election? And you
Oh,
can
Heather.
comment on that or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ire that I certainly empathize with is that, hey, this program was approved November 2021. Why have we not seen any dollars go to deploying networks since then? And really, NTIA is even slightly ahead of that timeline because we are following the explicit instructions that are written in the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed and developed by Congress. So even if, and really one of the biggest delays there was the requirement to use the FCC's and availability map, which took a year and a half to develop for states, for us to be able to make those state allocations based on availability and need. We were also compelled to go through the BEAD 5-year plan process, as well as the initial proposal process, to make sure that we are making appropriate use of taxpayer money. So even if NTIA was able to distribute funds immediately, based on that timeline, there's still a 3-year runway before we even get to this point. So in many regards, we're really right on time, but I certainly sympathize with the fact that, why don't we get shovels in the ground sooner? Why can't people benefit from this immediately? There were other complaints about, why was NTIA unable to just cut checks to states and territories immediately for deployment and trust that, and allow states to run their own operations. That's just simply not how the law was written. That where this funding did have to be distributed in ways that were specified by Congress. So it does feel a little odd for that to be brought up at this point when it was a bill created by Congress by this law, to then ask, hey, why did Congress write the rules this way that are then implemented? But I think it's great that there's always a lot of discussion. We know that broadband access is continues to be a bipartisan issue, very popular amongst members of Congress. So, where there may be concerns about the upcoming election and what that means for the program, we've had nothing but support of the intent of this bill, which is to connect every American household. But I don't know. I'm curious what Heather, if you had other thoughts about how that went.
Well, for me, I was looking at it from the ISP standpoint, and particularly small ISPs. Project areas are a concern for us, matching funds at times. And for us, actually, the low cost is it's a barrier. I mean, I have about 3 people per square mile in my service territory, so I don't have that bulk of population to help offset costs. So from our perspective, that's where the things we were watching, and to see if Congress was attentive to that, or if this is going to be more skewed and the larger providers are the ones that are going to be building out the networks.
I didn't hear a lot of people advocating for affordability for smaller ISPs. It was sort of a lot of the concerns that that the low cost availability requirement is a form of rate regulation, which is just simply not the case here. I think that is worth raising.
Yeah, we're looking at it long and hard. And to be honest, I can't say right now if my management's going to go forward. If it was my guess, I would say 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
The barriers might be too large for us to overcome.
Mm-hmm. The state broadband offices do have some tools that they'd be able to work with to try to make their within their own NOFO that they develop to make affordability more feasible. But that's something that we'd have to work out with the broadband office on a case-by-case basis.
And we've had some discussions. We have very good communication with the broadband office.
So Nicole, if I'm not mistaken, one of the other issues that seems to be emerging is use of alternative technologies. You know, obviously there was a focus with BEAD on, excuse me, feeling a little sick today, on fiber. And now people are saying, well, maybe we need to be looking at other options. Do you have any comments about that?
Yes, so we do have an alternative technologies fact sheet that was recently made available for all broadband offices and eligible entities. And there certainly is a fiber preference that's baked into BEAD to ensure that we're making the most future forward investments, but the program has always allowed for alternative technologies for states to maximize their allocation to reach every single household that they are required to serve. So that has always been the case, and we know that especially in a large rural state like Arizona, that will be necessary to be able to stretch that $993 million to reach every single household. So that has always been contemplated, and certainly fiber, the ranking system, if you look in Arizona's volume 2, they have a ranking system for priority broadband projects, which are fiber led, as well as non-priority fiber projects, which are all of these alternative technologies. And they go through a series to assess each project based on the viability and how much it makes sense in terms of dollars and cents for those project areas. One interesting thing about Arizona's volume 2 is that they actually allow for applicants to sort of mix technologies if it's going to be appropriate for that project area for maximizing the award. So if you have an area that will be served mostly by fiber, but you identify some locations that would require alternative technologies, that's an option that Arizona was pretty smart about to put forth for round 1. So there are, it is absolutely going to take a blend of different types of broadband to be able to serve every household. I know Sandy says that, their calculations of what fiber to every single household, that changes based on the information that they get in a given week, but $1 billion is not enough to meet all of that needs. So it is going to take a few different approaches.
Okay. Thank you, Nicole. Any other questions or comments for Nicole? Okay, let's move on. Mala, do you have anything that you want to share this morning?
Yes, absolutely. The cybersecurity window pilot project, FCC's pilot project window opened this Tuesday, September 17th. It is the first application window. There are going to be 2 windows. The first is an intent to participate in the pilot program. That opened up on September 17th and will close on November 1st, 11:59, of course, EST. This first window requires the filing of Form 484, Part 1, and that's the form that serves as your initial screening mechanism. So it needs to show why you're applying, what you're applying for, and who are the participants in it. That means you can apply singly as a school or a library, but also as a consortium, who is part of your consortium and things like that. But you don't need to detail the exact technologies that you're going to use. This is just an intent, and things like what your proposed plan is, just an outline of the plan, your proposed costs of what you think it's going to take for you to do this. What are the metrics that you're going to use for evaluation? Any supporting documents that you have, all of those are an important part of this first part of the application. From this, FCC will shortlist those that are eligible or they picked for part two. And part two will be the regular application process, similar to what E-rate follows. It will go through the Form 470, which is the RFP method, the competitive bidding process, et cetera, and follow all of those E-rate processes for the application to go through. So anyone who's interested in applying, let me know. I'm trying to keep track of those who are applying, because this is going to be a pilot project, just like the NTIA's competitive bidding. It's not that everybody is going to get it, and there's going to be a selection of a few that would get it in each state. So I would like to put you in touch with each other so that you can, apply together as a consortium or share your thoughts on what works best. So let me know if that's of interest to you. The only other thing I'd like to mention, two other things I'd like to mention. One is that the E-rate administrative window opens in it opens today, actually. And that administrative window means you can update your data on your portal. This means you can update your addresses, you can update the students, the number of students, you can update the square footage, and and especially who's going to be your lead administrator for the program, who else has access to the portal. All of those details can be updated by the applicant now. When the application window, the administrative window usually closes when the application window opens. So until that time, you have time to update your data. And then once they lock it down, then you won't be able to do it yourself. That is, the applicant won't be able to do it themselves. They will have to do it through the customer service portal, or call the customer service to get any of those updates in. So this is a good time to review that and to make sure you update it. The last thing I'd like to talk about is the Wi-Fi Hotspots E-rate program. We did have a meeting with USAC. I went to the program yesterday to Dallas, and we had the updates. And one of the questions, of course, the main questions that people had was whether they should apply for it as Category 1 or 2. Category 1 is internet access. Category 2 is internal connections within the anchor institution. The Wi-Fi hotspot device is a recurring internet service, so it is eligible in Category 1. There is a funding cap, though, pre-discounted funding cap of $90 per hotspot device and $15 per month per line for the service itself. And also there is a requirement that if the hotspot is loaned out and not in use for 90 days, then the service provider has to disconnect it. So, it behooves the library or the school that is loaning it out to let the customers know that it has to be in use, otherwise it will be disconnected. So also USAC does not encourage you to apply to have a box full of them to loan out whenever you want. They want you to be sure that you order or you apply for as many as you think you will need, maybe a 5% extra spare inventory, but not a lot more than that. So do the hotspots have to be compliant with ZIPA? Yes, they do. If they are going to be used on a device that is owned by the anchor institution. If they're going to use it on their own device, they don't have to be ZIPA compliant. So any questions? Okay, back to you, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Mala. So a couple of quick things. Kelly, are you still there? Yeah, there you are, Kelly. So Kelly, can you take just 2 minutes because we're running out of time, and we'll spend some more time in the future about what you included on AZ1, specifically relating to anchor institutions. I think we have not spent nearly enough time talking about the role of anchor institutions in all this. So you want to just take a minute, please?
Sure. Yeah, let me know if there's a particular direction you'd like me to take. Happy to drop in the link if you haven't visited as one. It's az-1.info is the website. And we have an Arizona broadband map there where we've tried to show different types of community anchor institutions, like where hives are located. Those are community tech centers being opened up across the valley. And we also have libraries, schools, medical facilities. If there are other community anchor institutions that you'd like us to add, happy to have a conversation with you about what might be useful for you. We also recently added a layer of covered populations, as that is an important insight for a lot of the programming, BEAD and digital equity. And so now you can actually click on the covered populations layer. And then if you click by census tract, you're actually able to get insights by that census tract of the breakdown by percentage of each of those covered populations. So if anyone wants help on it, please feel free to reach out to me. Happy to have a one-on-one Zoom conversation with you. We can actually look at the maps together just to meet the needs of your own organization. So thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Kelly. I'd love to have a conversation at another time in another meeting about anchor institutions. I've been talking with Pima Community College here, for example, and saying, well, they've got different pieces of digital inclusion kinds of things happening. I can't seem to find where there's a strategic plan for digital inclusion. So if you look at their overall goals, and I'm sure this is probably true with many of the other community colleges, that their overall goals talk about equity and inclusion, not digital equity and inclusion. And so I'm a big believer that we need to do much more in working with the anchor institutions than I think we've done. My personal opinion. I'd love to have more of a conversation about that in the future. And with that, one last thing, Gordon, I see you're still online. And Gordon, if you remember that we talked about some time ago about putting you on the agenda for October the 2nd to talk about the needs of the visually impaired. And so Gordon is really awesome in being able to articulate the needs of that population. So Gordon, do you have anything you want to add to that? And then we'll plan on October 2 for you to really get in depth on what you see as some of the challenges and issues.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Steve. Actually, the challenge you posed to me was to have some deaf folks showing up, reaching out to the deaf community.
Yep. I did.
It's one of those things where I'm going to have to double down on that effort because it's a harder group to reach than I had envisioned. I thought if I hit the people at the State Independent Living Council who have they're senior members of the disability community appointed by the governor, and they have oversight on all the uh, um, federally funded programs and institutions as peer-based organizations and advocates. So they're a good group, but the deaf members of that group haven't reached back to me, and I've explained what we're about, and so I'm kind of hoping to see that, pick up a bit. Decades ago, at the Arizona School for the Deaf and Blind, I trained a group of deaf kids to be our television crew, and it was very effective. Afterwards, the teachers sort of told me they were glad I took those kids because those are the worst kids they had. So I'm kind of a little bit gun shy about, I explained to them, well, they just weren't challenged clearly because they were the best crew I ever had, so I was a little bit irritated, to say. So I'm not always, institutions are always the best way to go. So, it's to beat some bullets, right? And it's been, how's it going for the digital inclusion of people with disabilities? Because they're not an easy group. Just think of the old folks who don't want to be disabled. Thank you very much. They just don't walk so good anymore. So, it's a challenge to think of how we're going to embrace these groups. And, so far, all of these things have kind of focused in on technology and certainly the federal rules and the challenge of administrating these things. But, just on the ground, how are people supposed to get this benefit, and how are we going to help them do that? And that's still out there, and I'm still concerned. Thanks for the time.
Well, thanks, Gordon. And we don't want to get into that discussion today because that is obviously a lengthy conversation. But let's talk about whether you think we can get something together by the second, or if I need to go to Plan B. So I'll be reach out to you shortly and figure out how we do that. But I do think, and you basically touched on this, it's a difficult population to reach, to engage, and to service. And while it certainly has been one of the areas that is included in our planning, but whether we have a clear path in that, I could be mistaken. And Aaron, you maybe can talk more to that, or Nicole, about how we're going about trying to address the needs of particularly the visually impaired. So
I'll just one last thing I'd say. They're not difficult. We're difficult.
okay.
We haven't made it. Our society has not made a good effort here. That's all I'm saying. All of it.
Okay, well, we're going to get into more of that when we do another update, Gordon. We're running out of time today. Aaron, I don't know if you want to make any comments about that or not, or we can wait until we do this with Gordon in the future.
Just briefly, I had the express honor of presenting in front of AZ about a week and a half ago, and it was a wonderful experience, and I was so happy that they invited me into their space. And I think that that's kind of key, right? Like maybe like Gordon just said, we as a society are the ones who need to make the effort to be engaged instead of the other way around, right? So we're doing our best from the DE perspective in the State Broadband Office, and I know we have a long way to go, and it's been wonderful to have guidance along that path of where we need to be.
Yeah. Well, Gordon is a great resource and advocate, so we definitely want to tap into his capabilities. So anything else? I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is Dana. I just was wondering if Gordon had reached out to the Valley Center of the Deaf. I put the link to their website in the chat. Just in my previous positions, I actually previously worked for the city of Tempe, and they were actually a really good resource. And there are quite a few housing communities for the deaf, and I know that they do everything that they do. They actually need that capability. Now, here in the Phoenix metro area, they have connectivity, but in our outlying areas is where they struggled. And I think that might be a good resource. I put the link in the chat. I don't think the same director I was.
Can you do your classes? Yeah, it's the end of the class.
Who's speaking in the background there?
Someone has an open mic. But they they were a really good resource. And again, they have the list of all the housing um, to meet the needs here in the Maricopa County area. So there are quite a few housing specifically for them, and they have educational resources through those housing. But the outlined areas are the ones, but they could get you in contact with them. And I did put the link for their website in the chat if Gordon would like to maybe follow up and see if that might be a good lead or a resource.
Dana, can you
Thank you.
remind us who you're with, please?
I'm sorry, repeat.
Who are you with, Dana?
Sarah Star Technologies. Again, just as my experience in previous roles with the city of Tempe, they were a really good resource for me. I currently now work for Sarah Star Technologies.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Not a problem. If you need anything,
there,
Gordon, reach out. I did put my email in the chat.
wonderful.
Speaking of chats, as I always try to remind people, probably should have at the beginning of the meeting, but you can download the chat. If you go to chat at the top, there's 3 ellipses. And if you click on those, you can download the chat to your computer. As you know, I do send out the chat after the meeting. Maybe a little slower now because I'm on vacation, but I will try to get all of that information out to everybody like I always do. So anything else for the good of the order before we end for today? Going once, going twice. Okay, thank you all. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Reminder, no meeting next week. So we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye now.